Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Cousins, Deputy CEO of the United Nations Foundation, and it's absolutely terrific to be here. I'm so pleased to be able to introduce the first conversation of the day about the global goals that world leaders adopted on Friday and that give all of us a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make the world a better place. To kick off the day, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Kathy Calvin, President and CEO of the United Nations Foundation, Jimmy Wales, founder of the Wikimedia Foundation, Ricardo Fuentes, Executive Director of Oxfam Mexico, and Helen Clark, Administrator of the United Nations Development Program.
Good morning. Wow, you know, we've been in existence here at the Social Good Summit for about 5 years, but this is the first time we've had an opening ceremony. I mean, really, big time. And how exciting was that to get to see the people you saw read the goals that are going to guide our next 15 years. And you know, Richard made such a good point in the beginning that it's got to be and. Because if you think of the job that all of those heads of state had to do in choosing goals, and they didn't just pick the top 10, right? How easy and how fake would that have been? They really worked hard to figure out the issues that mattered to all of us. And so we're going to set the stage today for the next 2 days of the Social Good Summit, but really for the next 15 years of the work we're all going to be doing together, because it's going to take everybody in this room to make sure that the goals that we're about to embark on are not only universal, leaving no one and no region and no country behind, not only taking people from poverty to prosperity, but also protecting our planet, and finally, calling on the best of all of us. Whether you're in civil society, government, academia, the private sector, whoever you are, we need you. So we're going to talk about that today and some of the things that will make this go easily or more difficult. We have a cool panel to do it. You heard who they are, but let me just say a word or two about each of them as we get launched. So Helen Clark has been the head of UNDP, and prior to that, for the last 9 years, I think, close to that. And before that, she was the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And Helen has called the year that we are in a once-in-a-generation year. And I think she's going to explain what that means. Jimmy Wales is the founder of Wikipedia, which has changed all of our lives and our ability to access information. And he's got a new idea called People's Operator, which we'll hear about today. And Ricardo Fuentes, who's sitting to my left, has been the head of research for Oxfam and now is head of Oxfam Mexico. And he came up with the vital data point that the richest 85 people in the world control as much of our global wealth as the bottom 50%. So we have some experts on this stage. And Helen, let me ask you to start, because you've been deeply involved in the creation of these Sustainable Development Goals, but more importantly, you're going to be deeply involved in their implementation, which is starting today. What's magical about the goals, and what are some of the challenges we're facing?
Well, I think the challenges are that we're seeing a lot of conflict and disasters affecting the lives of many, many millions of people. And that tells us that one of the most important part of the new goals is this goal 16 on creating peaceful and inclusive societies, because without that, we don't have the foundation for development. In the declaration around the goals, there's a phrase that says there cannot be peace without sustainable development, there can't be sustainable development without peace. So at least we're getting to really focus in the goals on what are the underpinnings of development. Now, related to that, I believe, is the goal on tackling inequalities. Because where you have exclusion, people excluded right on the margins of society, on the margins of economies, no voice in political systems, you get trouble. And that trouble, in extremis, will spill over to conflict and set people back so much. So this is about doing development differently. The MDGs had very important ends, we didn't achieve all of them either. But this agenda talks about ends and means, and that is critical to implementing an agenda. You can have all the goals that you like as fine end points, but unless you see that peace and the rule of law and effective, honest government and inclusive growth and bringing everybody in to have a stake in this is the way of achieving it, we don't go so far. Once in a generation year, of course, it's not only the global goals, which you don't get to write too often, once in a generation, but this climate change conference in Paris is extremely important, and it also links very much into the global goal agenda.
Great. So you made a good point. We can't just solve this by setting the goals. We have to have a means for getting there. Jimmy, innovation's got to be a big piece of that, and it's not just innovation for its own sake, but that's actually one of the tools for ensuring that we find new ways of making sure all of these goals are met. How do you think about that challenge, and what's new about how we're going to be approaching it?
Well, I mean, I think that you know, one of the things that we have to understand is that we don't know yet how to solve all of these problems. We are going to need a lot of innovation from a lot of different people, and we have to think in a very entrepreneurial way. We have to think in a way not just about the old model of wealthy countries sending aid money too often into, sadly, black holes that don't seem to work out very well, but we need to supplement that, augment that with real support for local entrepreneurship, innovation, development, in all of those different ways, because the challenges that we face are, it's not these aren't simple issues. And in fact, one of the great strengths of the goals is by having 17, which is way too many to communicate effectively. You can imagine the challenge that Richard Curtis and the Project Everyone team had to say, well, we've got to get 17 bullet points to everyone on the planet. Okay, that's kind of hard to do, but in terms of a realistic framework, it's really important because all of these issues are interdependent. You cannot really solve extreme poverty without solving education. You can't solve problems with water without addressing governance issues. And all of these things are so interdependent that it's really important that we have global goals, that we have a plan, including, as you said, not just beautiful endpoints that we all say those sound great, but actually beginning to get, even at this high level of abstraction, some concept of path forward, how to get there.
Yeah, so two paradigm shifts, not just top down, it's also going to be bottom up, and it's not just coming at a person with solutions that are unrelated, but starting with the person and what they need.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly,
you're saying.
Exactly.
So Ricardo, data. Seems like we need better data. Often data is old and cold. How do we think about it differently so that we have better outcomes?
Well, I mean, I think data is at the heart of the next development agenda. If we don't know what's happening in the most marginalized groups of the population around the world, it'll be hard to know how they're doing. And I think technology presents a massive opportunity, but technology will not be enough. We need to think about it in political terms. And I think that's a big opportunity of this new set of goals that, I mean, I also have my favorite goals, which are number 10 and 16 too, because they present this political opportunity. Talking about inequality is something that was not allowed 15 years ago. And talking about the rule of law and justice and accountability is very important. And then data and the technology that we need to collect that data is important, but we need to think about the politics. Why is it that we don't have information about the most marginalized people in the central mountains of Vietnam, or we don't have enough information about the people in the refugee camps in the Middle East or in Southern Europe? And I think we have to think about that seriously. You know, like, I mean, we have to think about the political economy implications of that. We have to think about how to create the incentives for national governments to actually put the resources to collect that information, and where governments are not capable or don't have the political will to collect that data, use the international community to actually collect that data and use all these fantastic new sources of information that you know, satellite imagery cell phones, drones, and all those things, how can they be put for good?
Well, I think you're making a point about how do we use people to affect political will, both to send that message and then hold governments accountable. How do we engage people in supporting these goals, learning about the goals, putting their own effort into the goals? Jimmy, I know you've got this new platform. I think it's forgiving, but maybe you've been thinking about this question of how do we engage citizens, anybody in this room?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, one of the things that I'm finding really interesting as a development in the world is the ability through social network platforms for people to communicate messages outside the traditional hierarchies. And so what this means is that for a company, so I'll just tell you the basic model of the People's Operator. So we're a mobile phone company where 10% of your bill goes to the cause of your choice, 25% of the company's profits go to charity. Our prices were a good value in the marketplace, so how do we afford that? It has to come out of that marketing budget. So we say to you, instead of spending more than 10% of your money on Super Bowl commercials and TV ads and all that, we'll spend it on a cause that you care about, something that you care about, and please help us spread the word. And so towards that end, I've created TPO.com, a social networking platform, which is a donation platform, a place for people to rally together, bring people in, and to say, look, at least for this one small part of my consumption in the world, rather than going with a provider who's going to spend a chunk of my money on more marketing, I'm going to spend it on spending money on one of the goals or one of the things that I care about. It's not going to change the world in any fundamental way, although I hope to raise billions of dollars for causes. But it's that kind of thinking where we say, actually, people really do want to help. They do want to do good things. We need to find sustainable business models to allow people to do that. And so this is part of what I'm trying to do. So everybody go sign up, tpo.com. Okay.
Great. And of course, there's globalcitizen.org. Don't be a bystander. You can sign up there and learn how to take actions all year long. There's the One campaigns, Poverty is Sexist, Goal 5. So we know there are lots of good ways to get involved. But Helen, you all at UNDP led a huge effort, actually historic effort, to be inclusive in getting people to share their views coming into the goals. How do we build on that now going from here forward?
Well, it was a huge effort and probably unprecedented in UN history to reach out to the world's peoples as was done. And the My World survey has had over 8 million replies to it now, with people saying what their hopes and priorities are. And but to me, social media is key. Look, I grew up in an age where to be engaged in issues, you either went to a meeting at night where someone took the minutes, or you turned up at a demonstration with a placard or something like that. The world has changed. People are so interconnected where they have access to the technologies. The mobile phone is prolific around the world. Still some way to go in getting access to broadband and connectivity to many people in developing countries. But so often people say, what can I do? And I say, use your voice. Use the means at your disposal to add to a sense of optimism and hope that things are happening out there, not feed the cynicism that it's all hopeless, because it isn't all hopeless. Now, a key point from the consultations, people were very interested to be engaged at the national level consultations and in other ways. But a key bit of feedback was, don't walk away now and not come back to us again for 15 years. We want to be engaged in the implementation and the monitoring. And that means that the data point that was being made earlier is very important, because people need to be able to monitor what's happening, the citizens, organisations, civil society. So I think it's going to be quite a challenge to governments, because expectations are out there that people aren't just going to go away and not be interested. They are interested. And for all of us involved in advocacy, we can help nurture that interest.
So Ricardo, 3 billion people are connected around the world, but 4 billion aren't. How do we give them a voice and let them participate in this conversation as well?
Well, I mean, it's about organization and collaboration, and I think that's one of the roles of organized civil society to use the platforms that we have with the technology that we have to change the power structures. So the title of the conference is New Power, New Technology, and I think it's a very interesting title because what we need to do with the technologies and with the organizations that we have at hand is to change the power structures, be disruptive. Because yeah, we've had a lot of successes in terms of development, but we can see, you know, that inequalities continue to increase if the trends continue as they go until now. The richest 1% in the world will control more money than the rest of the 99%. Next year. So we need to change the structures, and for that we need to all work together, and international organizations, civil society at the national level, but at the international level, and then make sure that we bring with us the people who are not connected, and I think it's a moral responsibility, and it's a huge one. You know, if we are to achieve these goals, we need to bring everyone into this process, and I think that's one of the kind of the big advantages of these goals, that they were inclusive at the national level. All countries participated in the negotiations. So now we have to make sure that all societies, you know, rich and poor alike, and the middle class, through the different mechanisms that are available within countries, participate in the implementation and in the national monitoring of these goals for the next 15 years. Helen is right. You know, we cannot just sign and celebrate these goals this weekend. Right. Tomorrow, you know, when we go back to work, and I go back to work tomorrow, we need to use this framework and then hold our governments to account, and hold, you know, whoever we need to hold to account.
So I'm going to ask the panel in a minute or so, in a minute each, to think about what will be said on this stage 5 years from now. What will we be talking about? What will we be worrying about? So Helen, let me ask you to go first.
Well, I think there's two ways this can go. The best way it can go is that, firstly, countries get really serious about writing the goals into their national development plans. There is a high degree of ownership by all the governments around the world. They've all signed up to them, and we've had many requests for support in doing that. If that happens and it's followed through with budget allocations and serious strategies that do deliver the goods on the goals, fantastic. We'll be here in 5 years' time. We'll say, look at these progress reports. This is fantastic. Okay, what's the other scenario? The other scenario is that we all get blindsided by the overwhelming tide of problems out there, and the goals go on the back burner. That must not happen. We must see this as the long-term way of investing in a world that is peaceful and inclusive and just, and one that's the future we want for coming generations. So two ways, and it's up to us, isn't it? It's up to us.
We'll be watching. Jimmy.
I'll focus on one thing much more specific. That's a good broad overview. It's just something that I think not many people are noticing that's happening right now, that's going to have an enormous impact in the next 5 years. And that's the rise of the really inexpensive Android smartphone. So now for about $40 US, you can get a phone running Android. That's the specifications of the phone are very, very similar, almost identical to the original iPhone, which was about $800 a few years back. So for $40, that means that they're selling hundreds of millions of these in the next several years. Basically, the next billion people are going to come online in the next 5 years, which is much sooner than most people, even in my industry, realize and are anticipating. And this is going to empower a huge number of people to do a huge number of things that we can barely even guess what that's going to be right now. We have seen, you know, quite famously a few years back, the Arab Spring, that same kind of rise in social activism, a rise in political activism from people who previously had no means to even get organized or even to find out the facts, is going to have an enormous impact. And I think it's going to impact on every single one of the goals, every single thing that we're doing, the way we're thinking about things. It's going to be incredibly disruptive, mostly in a good way, but there's going to be bad things that happen as well.
Thanks for the prediction. Ricardo.
Well, I mean, I'm going to talk about my hopes more than what I think is going to happen. But I think there are two things I hope happen in the next 5 years. One is that we have a clear set of indicators with new methodologies and new sources of information that can bring into the statistical system and into the information pool the people that we're not counting right now. So I think that that's really important. And I think it's really important that we harness all the technology that we have at hand to make sure that that happens. And the second thing is that with that information, I want these communities that are marginalized, and with the framework of the SDGs, to go and hold their local and their national governments to account and say, you're not investing enough in education, you're not investing enough in health, you're not strengthening the rule of law, and this is a commitment that you made 5 years ago. Yeah. And I think that's what I would expect. That's what I would hope that that people will be discussing here 5 years from now.
Well, come back in 5 years. Let's ask the panel to come back and we'll talk about it. But in the meantime, I think you all know what you need to be doing, and we look forward to working with you to make sure that the goals have a running start and that we tell everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.